plasma restraints burned into Daniel Carter's wrists as the Vrexian guards shoved him forward into the crystalline throne room. He didn't cry out. Pain was just another language, and he'd learned to speak it fluently during 3 years of interstellar war. Queen Zarathix rose from her obsidian throne, her 4 eyes gleaming with contempt. Her scales shimmered between violet and crimson, a display of her species' natural superiority. At 9 feet tall, she towered over every human who'd ever stood before her, and none had left this room alive. "Another specimen of the weak flesh," she hissed, her voice like grinding metal. "Your diplomats begged for this audience. They offered you as tribute, human. A cultural exchange, they called it." She laughed, a sound that made the other Vrexians in the chamber click their mandibles in amusement. What culture could creatures so soft and brief possibly possess? Daniel met her gaze without flinching. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, consequence of his rough journey here. The Vrexians had made sure he understood his place, beating him in the transport ship, denying him food and water. They wanted him broken before he reached their queen. "You find us amusing," Daniel said quietly. His voice carried across the vast chamber despite its calm tone. Zarathix descended the steps toward him, each footfall echoing like a war drum. "I find you pathetic. Your bodies break so easily. Your lifespans flicker past in near decades. You wage war with projectiles and explosions like primitive beasts." She circled him slowly. "And yet you speak of beauty. Your diplomats sent messages praising human art, human music, human poetry, as if creatures destined to die in a cosmic instant could create anything of lasting worth." The Queen's clawed hand shot out, gripping Daniel's face and forcing him to look up at her. "Your kind disgusts me. You claim to value beauty, but look at you. Fragile skin that tears at the slightest touch. Eyes that see only a fraction of the spectrum. Bodies that fail you after barely a century. You are insects pretending to be philosophers." Daniel's jaw clenched, but he didn't try to pull away. Instead, he spoke through her grip. "Then why did you accept this meeting?" Zarathix's eyes narrowed. She released him with enough force to make him stumble, "Because I wanted to watch hope die and humanize one final time before I order the complete annihilation of your colonies. 17 worlds, human. 17 worlds will burn because your species dared to reject our dominion. The Vrexian Empire spans 300 star systems," Daniel said, straightening himself despite the pain. "You've conquered 73 different species. Every one of them bent the knee within a year of first contact. But humans have held out for 3 years. That must bother you." The Queen's scales rippled from violet to deep crimson, a sign of rising anger. Several guards moved forward, their weapons charging with audible whines. "You dare suggest your resistance is anything but a temporary annoyance?" Zarathix's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "I have crushed civilizations that existed for millennia before your ancestors crawled from their caves. What makes you think your defiance means anything?" Daniel took a slow breath. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. Not weapons, not ships, not even tactics. Just words. Just one human standing before an alien empire and refusing to look away. "Because you're wrong about beauty," he said. "And deep down, you know it." The chamber fell silent. Every Vrexian present went perfectly still. No one had ever contradicted their queen so directly. The punishment for such insolence was usually immediate and creative, but Zarathix didn't order his execution. Instead, she leaned forward, her face inches from his. "Explain yourself, insect. and know that your next words will determine whether your species dies quickly or slowly." Daniel held her gaze. "You measure beauty by duration and strength, by the spectrum you can see and the years you can accumulate. But you're looking at it backwards." "Backwards?" The Queen's laugh was sharp and bitter. "I have lived for 3,000 of your years, human. I have witnessed the birth and death of stars. I have collected art from species you will never know existed. And you, who will be dust before I even notice time passing, dare to lecture me about beauty." "Yes," Daniel said simply, "because you've confused permanence with meaning. You've mistaken longevity for value, and that's why you'll never understand what makes humans dangerous." Zarathix's hand moved to the ceremonial blade at her side. Around the chamber, weapons powered up fully. The air itself seemed to crackle with lethal intent, but the Queen didn't strike. Not yet. Her curiosity, that ancient and patient curiosity that came with millennia of existence, held her back for just a moment longer. "Speak then," she commanded. "Amuse me with your dying philosophy, human. Tell me why your brief and broken existence holds any beauty at all. Give me one reason why I shouldn't end this conversation and your species with a single word." Daniel smiled then, despite everything, despite the pain, the fear, the weight of billions of lives resting on what he said next. He smiled because he finally understood something the Vrexians never could. A flower that blooms for a single day is no less beautiful than a mountain that stands for eons, he began. In fact, the flower might be more precious, precisely because it's brief. Part 2, Queen Zarathix's scales flickered through a rapid sequence of colors, purple to crimson to something almost black. In Vrexian physiology, this indicated genuine confusion mixed with rising fury. She had expected pleading, perhaps defiance, maybe even the tired philosophical arguments she'd heard from a dozen conquered species about the value of life and freedom. But this human was talking about flowers. "You compare your species to decorative plants?" Her voice carried dangerous amusement. "This is your defense? This is what you think will save your colonies from purification?" Daniel didn't break eye contact. The plasma restraints had burned through the first layer of skin on his wrists now, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm comparing your understanding of beauty to someone who's only ever seen shadows and thinks they understand light." The nearest guard raised his weapon, a crystalline rifle that could disintegrate flesh in seconds. Zaratix raised one clawed hand, stopping him. "Continue. I want to hear the complete depth of human foolishness before I respond." "Your species lives for thousands of years," Daniel said. "That's your gift and your curse. You have time for everything. Time to see every sunrise. Time to master every skill. Time to grow bored with wonders that would make a human weep with joy." "You said you've witnessed the birth and death of stars? Did you feel anything when you watched them die? Or was it just another Tuesday for you?" Something shifted in the Queen's expression. One of her secondary eyes twitched, a microscopic tell that Daniel caught only because he'd spent 6 months studying every scrap of intelligence about Vrexian biology before volunteering for this mission. "The life cycle of stars is a natural process," Zarathix said, but her voice had lost a fraction of its certainty. "It requires no emotional response." "Exactly." Daniel took a careful step forward, testing his boundaries. No guard shot him. When you live forever, everything becomes just another process. Another event in an infinite sequence. You collect art from conquered species. But do you feel it? Do any of those paintings make your hearts race? Does any sculpture make you forget to breathe? Or do you just catalog them, appreciate their technical merit, and move on to the next acquisition? The Queen's main eyes narrowed to slits. You know nothing of how we experience existence. I know you travel with an entourage of historians who record your every significant act, Daniel pressed on. I know your throne room is filled with artifacts from 300 systems, positioned perfectly for maximum aesthetic impact. I know you've conquered 73 species and made detailed records of their final moments. You surround yourself with beauty, Your Majesty, but I don't think you actually see it anymore. Zarathix moved with serpentine speed, her hand clamping around Daniel's throat and lifting him off the ground. His feet dangled in the air as she brought him level with her face. You accuse me of being numb to wonder? I, who have observed cosmic phenomena your primitive science cannot even name? I, who have studied art forms and dimensions your limited senses cannot perceive? Daniel's voice came out as a strained whisper, but he kept talking. A human child, seeing their first sunset, feels more wonder in that 5 minutes than you've felt in centuries. The Queen's grip tightened. Daniel's vision started to blur at the edges, but he saw something in her eyes, something that made him push through the oxygen deprivation and continue. We know we're temporary. We know we'll be gone in 70, 80, maybe 100 years if we're lucky. Every moment we have is borrowed time. Every sunset might be our last. Every person we love could vanish tomorrow. And that terror, that constant awareness of our own mortality, makes everything matter more. Every kiss, every song, every stupid joke with friends, it's all precious because we know it ends. Zarathix released him. Daniel collapsed to the crystalline floor, gasping for air. The Queen turned away, her posture rigid. Poetic, she said after a long silence, but ultimately meaningless. You're trying to reframe weakness as strength, claiming that your fragility gives you depth. This is psychological compensation, nothing more. Every conquered species attempts this eventually. They tried to convince themselves that their limitations are actually advantages. Daniel pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. Then let me ask you something. When was the last time you created something? Not commanded artists to create for you, not collected someone else's work. When did you personally make something beautiful? The chamber went absolutely silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. I am a queen, Zarathix said slowly. Creation is beneath my station. No, Daniel replied. Creation terrifies you. Because to create something meaningful, you have to risk failure. You have to put something of yourself into the world knowing it might be rejected, mocked, or forgotten. And you can't handle that. You've lived so long that the possibility of making a mistake, of being vulnerable, has become unbearable. So you surround yourself with the creations of others and pretend that appreciation is the same as understanding. Zarathix spun to face him, and for the first time since Daniel entered the chamber, her scales showed something other than rage or contempt. They flickered to a pale blue, the Vrexian color for uncertainty. You know what humans do? Daniel continued, sensing the opening. We write poetry knowing it might be terrible. We paint pictures that might never be seen. We compose music that might never be played. We create knowing we'll die, and our works might die with us. And we do it anyway, because the act of creation itself, the vulnerability of putting beauty into the world despite our limitations, that's what makes us alive. Alive? The Queen's laugh was hollow. I have been alive for 3,000 years. No, Daniel said quietly. You've been existing. There's a difference. You've been observing, collecting, conquering, but you stopped truly living somewhere around your 1,000th birthday. You stopped taking risks. You stopped feeling deeply. You stop letting anything surprise or move you. You become a museum curator in your own life, archiving experiences instead of having them. One of the Queen's advisors stepped forward, a smaller Vrexian with silver scales. Your Majesty, this human speaks only to delay his execution. Permission to silence him permanently? Zarathix raised her hand again, but this time the gesture was less certain. No, I want to hear where this desperate argument leads. Daniel took a deep breath. His wrists screamed with pain. His throat ached where she'd grabbed him. But he could see it now, the crack in her certainty. He just had to wedge it open. 3 years ago, when humanity refused your first demand for surrender, you were puzzled. Your record showed we couldn't possibly win. Our technology was inferior. Our population smaller. Our weapons weaker. Every logical analysis said we should have bent the knee immediately. But we didn't. And you still don't understand why, do you? The Queen didn't answer, but her scales continued their uncertain blue flicker. We fought because we understood something you'd forgotten, Daniel said. Life isn't about how long you last. It's about what you do with the time you have. A human soldier charging into battle, knowing they probably won't survive, isn't being foolish. They're choosing to make their brief existence mean something. They're deciding that some causes are worth trading years for, that some principles matter more than duration. Principles? Zarathix scoffed, but there was less conviction in her voice now. Another word for stubborn refusal to accept reality? Part 3. Daniel pressed his advantage. Tell me about the Kelthrin. They were species number 47 in your empire, right? Conquered about 800 years ago? Zarathix's expression hardened. The Kelthrin were master shipbuilders. Their vessels achieved harmony between function and form that few species have matched. They understood structural beauty at a molecular level. And where are they now? They serve the Empire. Their shipyards produce vessels for our fleet. They have prospered under our guidance. That's not what I asked. Daniel's voice was gentle but insistent. The Kelthrin you conquered built ships as art. Each vessel was unique, a reflection of the builder's soul. Now they build from your standardized templates, producing identical copies of approved designs. They're still making ships, but they're not creating anymore. You didn't just conquer them. You killed everything that made them special and left their bodies walking around. The Queen's scales rippled through several colors rapidly, betraying emotional turbulence. They are more efficient now, more productive. Their old ways were chaotic and wasteful. Their old ways were alive, Daniel countered. Now they're just organic machines following your programming. You did the same thing to the Hevix musicians, the Tauran painters, the Kellex poets. 73 species, and you've drained the vitality from all of them. You've created an empire of the walking dead, all producing beauty according to your specifications, and you wonder why none of it moves you anymore. I have preserved their cultures, Zarathix insisted, but doubt crept into her voice. Their works are catalogued, studied, appreciated across the empire. Preserved like insects in amber, Daniel said. Beautiful, yes, but dead. Art isn't meant to be perfect and permanent. It's meant to be alive, messy, evolving. It's supposed to reflect the chaos and uncertainty of existence. But you can't stand chaos. You can't tolerate uncertainty. So you've built an empire of perfect order where nothing surprising ever happens, and you call it civilization. The Queen descended the steps again, but this time her approach lacked the predatory grace from before. She stopped a few feet from Daniel, studying him with all 4 eyes. You speak as though your species has achieved some enlightenment we lack, but I have seen your worlds, human. I have observed your wars, your poverty, your environmental destruction. You fight among yourselves constantly. You create weapons designed solely to maximize suffering. You exploit your own kind for profit and power. And you dare lecture me about beauty and meaning? Daniel nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. We're a mess. We're violent, short-sighted, and self-destructive. We make terrible mistakes. We hurt each other. We fail constantly. And that's exactly my point. How is that your point? Because despite all of that, we keep trying. We keep creating. We keep hoping. We know we're flawed and we do it anyway. A human artist paints knowing their work will be judged, possibly rejected. A human musician performs knowing they might hit a wrong note. A human poet writes, knowing their words might never reach anyone. We are constantly vulnerable, constantly risking failure, constantly putting ourselves out there despite knowing we might get hurt. That's not weakness, Your Majesty. That's the bravest thing any being can do. Zarathix was silent for a long moment. Her scales had settled into a deep purple, the Vrexian color for contemplation. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I remember the first time I saw art, she said. I was young, barely 200 years old. There was a crystal formation in the caves beneath our homeworld. Natural, not created. But the way the light moved through it, the patterns it cast on the walls, I stood there for hours just watching. I felt something then, something I cannot name even now, 3 millennia later. When's the last time you stood somewhere for hours just to watch light move? Daniel asked gently. The queen didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to the artifacts surrounding her throne, the accumulated treasures of 300 systems and 73 conquered civilizations. Daniel could see her really looking at them, perhaps for the first time in centuries. You have not answered my accusation about human violence, she said finally. You speak of beauty and meaning, but your history is written in blood. Yes, Daniel acknowledged, but here's what you're missing. When a human soldier goes to war, they don't do it because they love violence. They do it because they love something else more. They fight because they have a family they want to protect, a home they want to keep, an idea they believe is worth defending. The violence is terrible, but it comes from love, from attachment, from caring so deeply about temporary things that they'll risk everything to protect them. And when humans wage war for conquest, for resources, for power, then we're being exactly what you think we are. Stupid, short-sighted, and cruel. But here's the difference between human empires and yours. Human empires fall. We build them in pride and watch them crumble, and each collapse teaches us something. We learn from failure because we have to. We don't have thousands of years to perfect our systems. We have decades, maybe centuries if we're lucky. So we fail fast, learn fast, and try again. Your empire has stood for 10,000 years, but it hasn't evolved in 9,000. You perfected your system and then stopped growing. You became static, dead. Zara Thythix turned away from him, moving toward her throne but not sitting. Instead, she stood before it, one clawed hand resting on the obsidian armrest. There was a species, she began slowly. Early in my reign, the Varashi, they were troublesome. Not militarily, they had no weapons worth mentioning. But they had a tradition. Every Varashi, upon reaching maturity, would create what they called a soul mark, a work of art in any medium they chose. It was considered the truest expression of their inner self. No two soul marks were ever alike. Some were sculptures, some were symphonies, some were mathematical proofs. They believed the act of creation was sacred. That to make something new was to touch the divine. Daniel waited, sensing the importance of this memory. I gave them a choice, the Queen continued. Integrate into the Empire, accept our systems, our order, our efficiency, or resist. They chose to resist. Not violently. They simply refused to stop creating their soul marks according to their traditions. They insisted that standardization would kill something essential in their culture. I thought they were being stubborn, irrational. I offered them everything: comfort, security, longevity through our medical technology, but they would not yield. What happened to them? I made an example. Zarathix's voice was flat, emotionless. I destroyed their homeworld, every Vorashi, every soul mark, every record of their existence, scattered their atoms across the cosmos as a warning to other species who might consider similar defiance. That was 6,000 years ago, and I have thought about them every day since. The admission hung in the air like a physical weight. Daniel could see the other Vrexians in the chamber shifting uncomfortably, clearly surprised their queen was sharing this history. Do you know what I remember most? Zarathix turned back to face Daniel. Not their defiance. Not even their final moments. I remember a single soul mark I saw before ordering their destruction. It was created by a young Vorashi, barely into adulthood. Just a simple clay sculpture of their two suns rising together. Crude by technical standards, but there was something in it. Something that captured not just what the suns looked like, but what it felt like to see them rise. The hope of a new day, the warmth on your face, the sense that anything was possible. You felt something when you looked at it, Daniel said. Yes, and it terrified me, because I realized that this barely adult creature had created something I could never replicate. Despite my age, my knowledge, my power, they understood something about existence that I had lost somewhere in my endless years. So I destroyed them, all of them, because I could not tolerate the reminder of what I had become. Tears formed in Daniel's eyes, not for himself, but for the queen standing before him, for this ancient being who had lived for millennia and only now was beginning to see the prison she had built around herself. You can't get them back, he said quietly. The Vorashi are gone, but you can honor them. Part 4, Queen Zarathix remained motionless, her massive form silhouetted against the glowing artifacts that lined her throne room. The admission about the Vorashi hung between them like a confession that had waited 6 millennia to be spoken. Around the chamber, her guards and advisors stood frozen, uncertain how to process their queen's vulnerability. Honor them how? Her voice was barely above a whisper. They are dust. Their world is scattered particles drifting between stars. There is nothing left to honor. Daniel took a step closer, despite the warning clicks from the nearest guards, by remembering why you destroyed them. Not because they threatened you militarily, not because they challenged your power, but because they reminded you of something you'd lost. They showed you that a brief existence filled with genuine creation is worth more than an eternal existence spent collecting other people's beauty. You speak of loss as though I have any concept of it. Zarathix's scales shifted to a dark crimson. I am eternal. I have never lost anything I could not replace. That's the problem. Daniel's words cut through the chamber. You've never lost anything, so nothing has value to you. When you can have everything, nothing means anything. But humans, we lose constantly. We lose people we love. We lose opportunities. We lose time with every breath. And that loss teaches us to cherish what we have while we have it. The queen turned to face him fully. You want me to believe that your weakness is actually strength? That your fragility gives you some moral superiority over my empire? No, Daniel said firmly. I want you to understand that we're not fighting you because we think we're superior. We're fighting because we refuse to become another exhibit in your museum of dead cultures. We've seen what happens to species that surrender to you. They survive, yes. They're preserved. But everything that made them vital, everything that made them distinct, it gets smoothed away. You turn them into perfect, standardized copies of themselves, and you call it civilization. I offer them order, peace, an end to suffering. You offer them numbness. Daniel's voice rose. The same numbness you've been living in for thousands of years. You've conquered 73 species, but you haven't had a genuine conversation with any of them. You've collected their art but never asked what it meant to the artists. You've archived their music but never felt the emotions it was meant to convey. You've turned the entire galaxy into a library, and you're the only patron who never actually reads the books. One of the advisors, an ancient Vrexian with scales faded to gray, stepped forward. Your Majesty, this human manipulates you with clever words. His species sent him here to delay our final offensive. Even now, their fleets maneuver in the shadow of the Kronos Nebula. This is a distraction, nothing more. Zarathax raised her hand for silence, but she didn't take her eyes off Daniel. Is my advisor correct? Is this elaborate philosophy simply a delaying tactic? Of course it is, Daniel admitted. Every second I keep you talking is another second my people have to evacuate the civilian population from our border colonies. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But that doesn't make what I'm saying untrue. Both things can be real at the same time. I'm trying to save my people, and I'm trying to show you something you've forgotten. Those purposes aren't contradictory. The honesty seemed to catch the Queen off guard. Her scales flickered through several colors rapidly before settling on a deep blue. At least you do not insult me with lies. She began to pace, her massive form moving with predatory grace around the chamber. But you have miscalculated, human. Even if your words have some merit, even if I were moved by your desperate philosophy, it changes nothing. I am one being. The Vrexian Empire is a machine that has run for 10,000 years. It does not stop because one queen experiences a moment of doubt. Then stop being a queen, Daniel said. The chamber erupted. Guards raised their weapons. Advisors shouted in outrage. The gray-scaled advisor who had spoken before roared a challenge in the Vrexian language that needed no translation. But Zarathax laughed. It was not the cruel, mocking laugh from before. This was something different. Genuine amusement mixed with something that might have been liberation. Stop being a queen, she repeated, tasting the words. In 10,000 years of empire, I have heard countless pleas for mercy, elaborate arguments for peaceful coexistence, desperate offers of tribute and alliance. But no one has ever suggested I simply abdicate. The audacity is almost refreshing. I'm not suggesting you abdicate, Daniel clarified. I'm suggesting you remember what queens are supposed to do. Not just rule, not just conquer, lead. Show your people something beyond expansion and control. You have the power to change the entire trajectory of your empire. The question is whether you have the courage. Courage? Zarathax's scales flashed to bright crimson. I have led fleets into the hearts of dying stars. I have faced down cosmic threats your species cannot imagine. Do not speak to me of courage. Those are risks to your body, not your identity, Daniel countered. Physical danger is easy compared to the risk of fundamental change. What I'm asking requires real courage, the courage to admit you were wrong, the courage to change course after 10,000 years, the courage to be vulnerable in front of your entire empire and say that maybe, just maybe, There's a better way." The queen stopped pacing. She stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the artifacts of her conquests, and for a long moment she simply breathed. The air itself seemed to hold its breath with her. "Tell me exactly what you propose," she said finally. "Not philosophy, not metaphor, concrete terms." Daniel's heart raced. This was the moment his superiors had planned for, though none of them had really believed he'd get this far. A truce, not surrender on either side. A genuine cessation of hostilities while we try something unprecedented. For 1 year, your empire stops all military expansion. No new conquests, no forced integration. Instead, you open cultural exchanges. Real ones, not the theatrical displays you've staged before. Send your people to live among humans. Send them to the Kelthran shipyards, the Havix concert halls, the Tauran galleries. Let them experience what those cultures were like before you standardized them. Let them see what's been lost. And in return, humanity shares everything we have. Our art, our music, our literature, our foolish and beautiful and tragic attempts to make meaning in a universe that doesn't care about us. Let your people feel what it's like to be mortal, not literally, but emotionally. Let them understand what it means to create, knowing your creation might outlive you. Let them experience the urgency that comes from knowing time is limited. The gray-scaled advisor stepped forward again. "Your Majesty, this is obviously a trap. A year gives humanity time to build defenses, forge alliances, prepare countermeasures. It is strategically disastrous." "Of course it helps humanity," Daniel agreed. "I'm not pretending this is altruistic. We need time. But it also gives you something you haven't had in millennia. A chance to feel something real. A chance to create instead of just collect. A chance to remember what the Varashi knew that you've forgotten." Zarathix moved to one of the artifacts on display, a crystalline sculpture from the Kelthran. She touched it gently, her claws barely making contact with the surface. "This was made by a Kelthran named Sureshtal. I remember him. He created this piece the day before his planet fell. He knew what was coming, knew that his civilization was about to end, and he spent his final hours making something beautiful. I took this from his workshop after he died. I thought I was preserving it, honoring it. Now I wonder if I just wanted to own the one thing he valued more than his own life." She turned back to Daniel, and for the first time he saw something in her 4 eyes that looked almost like tears. Vrexians didn't cry the way humans did, but the emotion was unmistakable. "Your people sent you here to die, didn't they?" she asked. "They never expected you to return." "No," Daniel admitted. "This was always a one-way mission. But I volunteered, because someone needed to stand in front of you and say these things. Someone needed to be willing to sacrifice their brief human lifespan to maybe, possibly, change the trajectory of galactic history. That's what you don't understand about us. We don't fight you because we think we can win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for even when victory is impossible." Part 5. The crystalline walls of the throne room seemed to pulse with reflected light, as Zarathix stood in silence, processing everything Daniel had said. Minutes passed. The guards remained alert but confused, their weapons still powered but no longer aimed. No one in the Empire's 10,000-year history had witnessed their queen in a state of genuine uncertainty. Finally, she spoke. "If I agree to this truce, if I allow this cultural exchange, what stops humanity from using that year to unite the other species? To form a coalition against us? Nothing," Daniel said simply. "That's exactly what we'll try to do. But here's the thing. You'll try to do the same. You'll use that year to study us, to find weaknesses, to prepare for the war to continue. Both sides will be maneuvering. That's just the reality of who we both are. But maybe, just maybe, something else happens too. Maybe in that year of actually seeing each other, we discover that total war isn't the only option. Maybe we find a third path that neither of us has considered yet. The gray-scaled advisor practically vibrated with frustration. Your Majesty, I must object. This human admits openly that his people will use the truce to prepare for continued conflict. He shows no respect for your authority. He should be executed as an example. Prepare for continued conflict, Zarathix repeated slowly. That's all we've done for 3 years. Prepare, fight, conquer. And what has it gained us? 17 human colonies remain independent. Their fleets, inferior as they are, continue to harass our supply lines. Their fighters die by the thousands but never stop coming. We are the Vrexian Empire. We have never struggled this long to subjugate such a minor species. Perhaps, Advisor Krethnox, the problem is not with the humans, but with us. The advisor recoiled as if struck. Around the chamber, other Vrexians showed visible shock. Their queen had just questioned the empire itself. 3,000 years, Zarathix continued, moving to her throne but still not sitting. I have been queen for 3,000 years. I have expanded our territory by a factor of 10. I have brought order to 300 systems. I have accumulated wealth and knowledge beyond measure, and I am so profoundly bored that I was willing to exterminate humanity just to feel something resembling interest again. She looked at Daniel with what might have been gratitude or perhaps pity. You came here expecting to die. You stand before me with burns on your wrists and blood on your face, and you lecture me about beauty. You are either the bravest being I have ever encountered or the most delusional, perhaps both. But you have achieved something remarkable. You have made me question things I have not questioned in millennia. Does that mean you'll agree to the truce? Daniel asked, hardly daring to hope. No. The word fell like a hammer. I cannot, not because I disagree with you, not because I think you're wrong, but because agreeing to this truce requires me to admit that the entire foundation of my empire, the core philosophy that has guided 10,000 years of expansion, is flawed. Do you understand what you're asking? You're asking me to tell every Vrexian that our superiority, the very thing we have built our identity upon, is an illusion. That our method of bringing order to the galaxy is actually killing it. That would tear the Empire apart. Daniel felt despair rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Then let it tear apart. Let something new grow from the pieces. You said it yourself. The Empire is a machine that's run for 10,000 years. Maybe it's time to build something different, something that doesn't require conquest and assimilation, something that allows for diversity and chaos and the messy beauty of independent cultures all existing together. Pretty words, but empires don't reform themselves. They expand until they collapse. That is the nature of power. Then you're choosing to be part of the collapse. Daniel straightened his shoulders despite the pain. History will remember this moment, Your Majesty. The moment when the Vrexian Empire had a chance to evolve, to become something greater than just another conquering force, and chose to continue down the path of expansion and eventual decay. You'll win against humanity eventually. Our numbers are too few, our technology too limited, but will cost you. Every human world you take will be paid for in blood and resources. And while you're grinding us down, other species will be watching. They'll see that resistance is possible. They'll see that the mighty Vrexian Empire can bleed, and eventually, whether in a century or a millennium, they'll tear you down. Because empires built on domination always fall. Zarathix's scales flashed through a rapid sequence of colors, emotions warring visibly across her body. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. Kneel. Daniel's breath caught. This was it. The execution. He would die here, and humanity would die with him. But he wouldn't kneel. He couldn't. If these were his final moments, he would face them standing. "No," he said. The guards moved forward, weapons charging to lethal levels. Advisor Krethnox hissed in triumph, anticipating the order to fire. But Zarathix descended from her throne. She walked toward Daniel with measured steps. And then, in a motion that seemed to defy the laws of physics and politics and 10,000 years of imperial history, the queen of the Vrexian Empire lowered herself to one knee before him. The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, advisors rushed forward, weapons fired into the air as a warning. But Zarathix raised her hand, and the throne room fell silent through sheer force of her will. "I kneel," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, not in surrender, not in defeat, but in recognition. This human, this brief and fragile creature who will be dead in perhaps 50 more years, has shown me something that 3,000 years of existence could not teach me. He has reminded me what it means to be alive. She rose to her full height, towering over Daniel once more. But something had changed in her bearing. The cruel arrogance was gone, replaced by something harder to define. Purpose, perhaps, or hope. "I accept your truce," she declared. 1 year, a genuine cessation of hostilities, cultural exchanges not as displays of dominance but as opportunities to learn. And at the end of that year we will meet again and decide whether to continue this war or forge a new path. She turned to address her shocked court. "I know this seems weak to you. I know you believe I have been manipulated by human rhetoric. Perhaps I have, but I ask you this. What have 10,000 years of conquest truly given us? We are powerful, yes. We are vast. But are we wise? Are we growing? Or have we been repeating the same pattern for so long that we've forgotten there could be alternatives?" Advisor Krethnox stepped forward, his voice shaking with rage and betrayal. "Your Majesty, I cannot support this decision. It violates every principle of the Empire. I must formally lodge my objection and request that you reconsider." "Your objection is noted, Krethnox. You are also relieved of your position." Zarathix's voice was steel. "This empire has been guided by advisors who think exactly like you for 10,000 years. Perhaps it is time for new perspectives." She looked back at Daniel. "You will stay here. Not as a prisoner, but as the first human ambassador to the Vrexian Empire. You will help me understand your species. You will show me what beauty looks like through mortal eyes, and perhaps you will help me remember how to create something rather than just collect." Daniel nodded slowly, processing what had just happened. He had come here to die. Instead, he had changed the course of galactic history, or at least, he had started to. The year ahead would be difficult, the treaty fragile. Both sides would test each other, push boundaries, look for advantages. But it was a chance, a real chance for something different. "There's one condition," he said. "During this year, you personally create something. Not command it to be made. Not collect someone else's work. You, with your own hands, create something beautiful. Something that expresses who you are, not just what you've conquered. Can you do that?" Zarathix's scales flickered to that pale blue of uncertainty again. "I have not created anything in over 2,000 years. I am not certain I remember how. Then you'll have to learn, Daniel said with a slight smile. Like a human, like someone who's starting from the beginning, risking failure, being vulnerable. That's part of the deal. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she laughed. It was not the cruel laugh from before, nor the hollow amusement. This was something genuine, something that might have been joy or perhaps terror at the prospect of change. Very well, she agreed. I will create something. Though I warn you, after 2,000 years of practice, whatever I make will likely be terrible. That's the spirit, Daniel said. As the court began to disperse, still shocked and uncertain about what they had witnessed, Daniel allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. His wrists still burned. His throat still ached. His body was a collection of pains that would take weeks to heal. But he was alive. Humanity had a chance. And standing before him was an ancient alien queen who had just taken the first step toward becoming something more than a conqueror. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was possibility. And sometimes possibility was enough. Zarathix gestured toward the far end of the chamber. Come, you will need medical attention for your injuries, and I will need to send word to my fleets to stand down. This will cause considerable confusion throughout the Empire. Some will celebrate, others will rebel. It may be that I have just triggered a civil war among my own people. Is it worth it? Daniel asked as they walked together toward the exit. The Queen paused, considering the question with the weight of 3,000 years behind her eyes. Ask me again in a year, she said, if we both survive that long. Behind them, the throne room slowly emptied. The artifacts remained, countless treasures from 73 conquered civilizations, but for the first time in millennia, they were not the most important things in the chamber. That honor belonged to a fragile human and an ancient queen who had both chosen vulnerability over certainty, possibility over control, and the terrifying beauty of change over the comfortable numbness of eternal stasis. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And perhaps that was the point.